The Western Conference is usually considered the better conference. For a lot of this decade, teams such as the Spurs, the Clippers, the Warriors, the Rockets, and the Lakers, and many more have made the Western Conference continuously exciting and made the Western Conference better than the East. And even in the last year, the fourth seed in the Eastern Conference, the New York Knicks, would have been a play-in team instead of a home court advantage team if they were in the West. So basically, the point I'm getting at is the Western Conference has always been really fucking good. But this year, there's a lot of uncertainty for most of the teams in the Western Conference and more than every year. And I find this very interesting. So I'll be talking about questions and weaknesses each team will have going into the season in the Western Conference.
They be like, what? Can you teach me how to dirty? You know why? Cause all the bitches love it. All I need is a beat that's super bumpin'. And for you to back it up and dump it.
Leave a like on this video and subscribe if you haven't already. I drop regular NBA content, and with the NBA regular season coming up, this might interest you. So do subscribe to my channel. So let's move on to the video. Last year before the playoffs, I made a video on why I thought the Western Conference playoffs was going to be the best playoffs in the history of the NBA. But well, that didn't happen. So now I'm making a video pretty much opposing that take. The video will be basically going through the weaknesses of each team in the Western Conference and the ranges of seeds each team can possibly be. So let's start off with the first seed of last year, the Utah Jazz. The Jazz have always had issues in the playoffs, and they haven't really made any changes this offseason to solve those issues. And to be honest, I don't think they can make any offseason changes to solve their problems. The issue with this Jazz team in the playoffs is the limitation of their most impactful player offensively and defensively, Rudy Gobert. Gobert cannot guard opposing teams when they run 5-out lineups. Gobert has improved in defending this lineup, and he's a significantly better pick and roll defender than he was in years prior. But the problem is, any perimeter defenders on the Jazz, except for Royce O'Neal, are not good at guarding the pick and roll, so Gobert is the only guy who carries their pick and roll defense. This just speaks to how amazing of a defender he is, because Gobert is their only dominant defender and they were still the 4th best defense in NBA history last year. But the problem with Gobert and the Jazz in the playoffs is not their defense, but their offense. Gobert has little to no post game, which allows opposing teams to play the smaller forwards and even smaller guards on him, which allow them to play their 5-out lineup which the Jazz cannot defend. I don't know if they solve this problem this year, so it will be interesting to see how that pans out for the Jazz. So even if they might be a great regular season team again, it will be interesting to see how their playoff run goes. Moving on, the uncertainty with the Phoenix Suns is their owner and the ceiling of the core they have right now. Recently there was a report saying the Suns are reluctant to give Ayton the max, which is concerning, not because Ayton is worth or not worth the max, but because Robert Sarver, the Suns owner, is someone who's known for notoriously being stingy when paying his players. And even if they do pay DeAndre Ayton, what's the ceiling of a team with Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, and a 36-year-old Chris Paul as their core? Championship? I'm not very sure about that. And as much as I love the Suns run and the Suns team last year, you can't deny that they had a lot of injury luck and more injury luck than you would regularly have. And Chris Paul also had one of his more healthiest seasons last year. So if Chris Paul can stay healthy, and if they'll pay their guys their contracts, and if they can actually beat the healthy teams which they didn't face last year, is the uncertainty for this Phoenix Suns team. Next up, the Denver Nuggets. It's quite obvious here, Jamal Murray's health. The Nuggets were obliterating teams last year after the Gordon trade, and they were my favorites to come out of the West last year until Murray got injured. Murray raises the ceiling of this team by a lot without a doubt, and they miss a very important shot creator in the playoffs when they don't have Jamal Murray. So it'll be interesting to see how Murray is back, because the injury he suffered has a history of making players not look like themselves. So based on how Murray returns, the Nuggets are either the second best team or even the best team in the Western Conference, or they can be a first or second round exit based on how far Nikola Jokic can take them. And another team which has injury issues is the Clippers. The uncertainty is Kawhi's health. There have been reports saying Kawhi Leonard is ahead of schedule on his return, but knowing Kawhi, no one knows when he's coming back, and it's more likely he doesn't return this year than he returns this year. And they're not contenders without Kawhi, so they can either be a top team in the Western Conference or a playing team based on how Kawhi comes back and if Kawhi comes back. I still expect this team to be a really good team and for Paul George to have an MVP level season, but for them to be a contender, which they're supposed to be, it will depend on Kawhi's health. I further elaborate on the Clippers in a video I dropped a while back, so go check that out. Moving on, the Mavericks. The supporter on Luka Doncic is their weakness. Kristaps Porzingis hasn't been the second star they hoped for, and for the brief periods he has been that second star they hoped for, he gets injured very quickly. They haven't filled any of the issues they have, and Porzingis is just not a reliable second option. The Mavericks go as far as Luka takes them, and to be fair, that's very far. But as great as Luka is, he can only take them so far, and unless he has an all-time carry job and some luck like LeBron did in 2007, the Mavs aren't going very far. So depending on how well Porzingis is when healthy, and if he's actually healthy, the Mavs can be two very different teams and teams which have two very different ceilings. Next up, the 6th seed last year, the Portland Trail Blazers. This is also quite obvious. Have they done enough to keep Lillard happy? For the first time since being drafted to the Trailblazers, Dame is entertaining the idea of moving on. And if the Trailblazers don't start off strong or have a mediocre season with another first round exit, the Trailblazers will have real issues. To be fair, there isn't much the Trailblazers front office can do to become like a contender or raise their ceiling with the roster they have right now. And the roster they have right now has a lot of flaws which will be exploited. So I don't think they can do anything, but the uncertainty of this team is whether Damian Lillard will stay with them this season or will he ask out after the season. Moving on, the Los Angeles Lakers. The Lakers were a part of the biggest offseason move this year, trading for Russell Westbrook. The fit is not as bad as people make it out to be because I believe Westbrook can be an all-time cutter, but it's still not very ideal. The 3-point shooting and spacing is mediocre to below average, and defensively too, they lost guys like KCP, Alex Caruso and so on, who are very good perimeter defenders and who really helped the defense of this team, and they really helped the defense of this team last year and made sure they were the best defense in the league without Anthony Davis. They're better from a star power standpoint, but I really don't know how much better they are than even their last year team when healthy or even the season they won. And as we have seen multiple times before with quote-unquote super teams, the smallest chemistry issues can be the reason for teams with such conflicting personalities to break up. The Lakers will be good in the regular season because they have arguably the greatest player of all time and one of the greatest regular season floor raisers in Russell Westbrook. But I have no idea what to expect from this team in the playoffs because they have a lot of issues which when come playoff time are usually exploited by opposing teams. Moving ahead, the 8th seed and the team I support personally, the Memphis Grizzlies. The Grizzlies traded away Valanciunas, who was arguably their best regular season player last year, and in a way took a step back, trading away Grayson Allen too. They're banking on younger guys like DeAnthony Melton, Jaren Jackson Jr., Desmond Bane and Ja Morant, and even the rookie Zaire Williams to take steps forward and nullify the value they lost trading away Jonas. Though I might be biased, I'm very sure all these guys are going to take these leaps and the Grizzlies are going to be better than people expect them to. But still, you can't deny the fact that it's uncertain how much of a leap players are going to take, and Jaren Jackson Jr.'s health is a very unreliable factor. So they can either be a lottery team or a playing team again this year. Next up is the Golden State Warriors. The Warriors are 1 month away from Klay Thompson's return, so it'll be interesting to see how they hold up until then, because there have been changes in their roster to make them better, but the support around Steph is still very iffy. Players like James Wiseman and Jonathan Kuminga are really not ready yet to play championship basketball, which the Warriors are expecting them to play, and especially play such a high IQ system and such a high IQ play style Steve Kerr makes the Warriors play. They've improved from last year and they've gotten an entire year out of their young guys, so they should be better, but still, playing raw young guys on a championship team is not the best move, and with their owner not really being certain on what the direction of this team is, it'll be very fun to see how it'll go on. Klay Thompson will still be pretty much the same shooter he is, because shooters shoot. But the slightest possibility that he won't be the same, and presumably defensive regression will be interesting to watch. Going ahead, the 10th seed, the San Antonio Spurs. This team is probably going to be rebuilding this season. Two players I'm excited to watch on this team are Keldon Johnson and Joshua Primo. These are the only two guys who I think have any chances of being cornerstones of a franchise. So even the Spurs will be really interested to watch how these two players play this year. Aside from that, they still have many starter quality players such as DeJounte Murray, Derek White, Jakob Poeltl, but they shouldn't be on rebuilding teams. Pop will probably win them a bunch of games because he's Greg Popovich and arguably the greatest coach ever. But there's no uncertainty on this team because there's nothing to be uncertain about. Next up, the two cursed franchises of this league, the Timberwolves and the Kings. The Timberwolves have no reason to be not extremely competitive this year. They have a top 20 to 25 guy in Karl Anthony Towns and very good supporting pieces around him. They have some issues obviously on defense and they have some issues offensively fit-wise too. But there's no reason they shouldn't be in the play-in this year aside from injuries. But there's the Timberwolves, man. Their existence is an uncertainty. No one will be surprised if they don't make it to the play-in, though they have a play-in quality roster. They have a well-constructed roster, so I'm very curious to see how this year pans out for them because there's something about the Timberwolves which just feels off every single year and it always proves to be right. And the other uncertain cursed franchise, the Sacramento Kings, have a decent team too. They have a lot of unhappy guys on their team who very clearly want to be traded like Marvin Bagley and Buddy Hield. They probably won't make it to the playoffs and be just outside the playoffs like they have been for these past few years. Their defense is historically terrible and they haven't really acknowledged that this offseason. Offensively, the fit is still very weird and actually overabundant, and De'Aaron Fox still doesn't have enough support on that end. If many things go right for them, they can be really good. Like I still believe Bagley has a lot of potential in this league and that Buddy Hield is a good offensive fit for them. But the Kings are just cursed, man, and just like the Timberwolves, no one will be surprised if they make it to the play-in tournament and no one will be surprised if they don't. And they probably won't with how incompetent their front offices and their coaches and how stacked the Western Conference is right now. Moving forward, the New Orleans Pelicans. The Pelicans have the third best young core in the league in my opinion. But just like many other teams in the Western Conference, health is a major issue for them. Zion Williamson, their franchise player, has had a surgery every year since his senior year in high school. And for a guy who relies so much on sheer explosiveness and athleticism, this might be a real issue and more serious of an issue than we give credit for. They were also historically bad in the clutch last year and defensively they suck. They still have Zion and Brandon Ingram, two all-star quality players and two very young players who can be very great players in this league. So both of them should take them to a certain extent, and with the rest of their team being better from a fit point of view, they should be better than they were last year. But as I said about the Kings and the Timberwolves, even if they don't make the play-in tournament, it won't be surprising. It will also be a very interesting race because presumably the Spurs rebuilding and tanking this year, there's one play-in spot left from last year for grabs. And with the Grizzlies probably being around this range too as they downgraded, the Kings, the Timberwolves, Grizzlies and the Pelicans will be fighting for two play-in spots. With three of these franchises being like fucking cursed, it'll be fun to see this race. I'll make an entire video about the Rockets and the Thunder after a while into the season because I want to see how their rookies pan out in an NBA pace and NBA defenses. And that's about it for today's video. Leave a like on this video and subscribe if you haven't already.